Hey, it's Dr. Brad with the latest in space news, and right off the bat, a solar storm, a warning that has come from NASA due to what we call a coronal mass ejection. In short, no, we do not have to worry about this one, but it is a warning that this is going to start happening a little bit more over the next few years, and something we do have to pay attention to the disruptions it can cause on Earth. So a coronal mass ejection is a massive eruption on the surface of the sun. I like to think of it as a sun burp. The sun is this giant magnet, and for every magnet you have a positive and negative side, the retractive side and the repelling side. Well, occasionally on the sun, it flips. And as it flips, a bunch of gas and plasma is released from the sun, shot off into space. Now, sometimes this can be concentrated into one beam or burst or kind of jet. Sometimes it can be spread out all around. Sometimes it's towards the Earth. Sometimes it's completely away from the Earth. So while it happens a lot, it's very rare for it to be directed at the Earth. Now, this one is directed at the Earth, and we're expecting it to hit the Earth over the next day or two. Now, as I said, this one is going to cause very little consequences or damage on Earth, so it's not one to really be worried about. But what we do know happens is as this stuff hits the Earth's atmosphere, well, firstly, it's electrically charged, and so this can create electrical interference in the higher layers of our atmosphere. So this often affects radio transmissions. Those radio waves go through the higher levels of our atmosphere, and through the interference, they can be kind of staticky or even blocked out or even some signals lost. Likewise, it can also affect our satellites. Our satellites are in space, so they can also have disruptions to their communication due to this interference. Now, again, this one is likely to create very little of it, but sometimes you can get really big ones that cause massive disruptions to satellite infrastructure, interference on the ground. And there have been a few instances in the past where they've been so big they have created problems on Earth. In the late 80s, there was a massive storm that hit Canada near Quebec. And so this disrupted power grids for weeks, causing billions of dollars of damage. The famous one was the Carrington event in 1859, when this storm hit the Earth. And it was so powerful, they saw the aurora to the equator. And while they didn't have electricity at that time, the early telegraph lines had so much power in them, telegraph operators got electrically shocked on the end. So we do worry about these bigger ones. And now our sun also has an 11-year cycle. So that means every 11 years, the sun goes from a period of less activity to more. And we're now just on the cusp of entering into this higher level of activity for about 3 to 4 years, kind of until like 2025 or so. So this means not only are we going to get more of these storms, but they're likely to be more intense and more frequent. And so lots of monitoring goes into monitoring these storms to make sure that we know if they're happening and if they're hitting to the Earth, that we can prevent any damage. Because we do get some warning. It takes anywhere between half a day to a few days for it to reach the Earth. So it's not like instantaneous, we have nothing to do. We have plenty of chances to react. So we don't have to worry about this one, but it's a reminder that over the next few years, especially with how many satellites we now have in orbit, we may have some more problems due to solar eruptions. And in my favorite black hole news, a dormant black hole has been discovered in our neighbor galaxy, the Large Magellanic Cloud. What is a dormant black hole? Well, this is what we call a stellar mass black hole, so a black hole formed from the death of a star. And in this case, the star is believed not to have exploded and created the black hole, but directly collapsed down. We actually think this is a major mechanism for creating these types of black holes, that all of a star, instead of partially it blowing up, directly through gravity is squeezed together to form a black hole. And it explains why we can get some of these black holes that weigh 80 or 100 times the mass of our sun. Now, it's dormant because this black hole is kind of by itself, not swallowing up any stars or galaxies. It's kind of just minding its own business. It is dormant and it is not active. Now, it has been discovered because this star has a lot of mass, it has a lot of gravity, and that gravity is what pulls in stars. But in this case, that gravity can also bend light from stars that are passing right behind it. It's what we call the gravitational lensing technique, or microlensing. As things pass behind the black hole magnifies that light a little bit, gives it kind of a little flash, and the star keeps going on its way. So we can measure that there's something there, and through the power of the magnification, we can measure how big it is. Now, as I said, this is in the Large Magellanic Cloud, so in our neighbor galaxy, so hundreds of thousands of light years away, poses exactly no harm to us at all, but it's actually kind of exciting to try and figure out how many of these black holes exist in that galaxy, but then also by extension, our galaxy, and the mechanisms, how they are created. As I said, we've long thought these black holes can directly collapse completely down from a star, and now it appears the case we found one. And falling space debris may kill someone. Not trying to cause a panic here, but there is a study that has shown that now, with all of the junk in space, there is a 10% chance of some one person out of the 8 or so billion people being killed potentially by falling rocket debris. So the idea is we are launching a lot of rockets. We're kind of launching a rocket every few days somewhere on Earth. Only a few years ago, that was maybe once a fortnight. And we're actually on track for once a day on average in a year or two. So with all of this stuff going up, a lot of it is uncontrolled. It goes into space, eventually comes back down to Earth, but uncontrolled. So as it comes in, it breaks apart and lands, usually in the ocean. 70% of the Earth is the ocean, but occasionally lands on land. A famous case of this was the US Space Station Skylab in 1979, crashed over Esperance in Western Australia. Now, no one was harmed, and no one so far has ever been harmed that we know of from space junk, but they're showing that with all of these rocket launches and all of the planned rocket launches, it's a small chance that someone, one person, may be injured or killed in the coming decade. Now, when they did this study, they realized that, hey, if we look at the orbits and inclinations of this space junk, there's a slightly higher risk towards the mid-southern latitudes. And that is just because of the angles they go in. So kind of between 10 and 15 degrees, so to speak, maybe down to about 35 degrees in the south has a higher risk than in the north. Now, that puts places like Australia, South America, lots of Africa in the range of being in a harmful location. Now, again, it's a very small chance. And the point here is really that it's not just a problem we can ignore. We need to expedite the process of trying to deal with space junk and limit space junk. And one of the easiest ways is to have the rocket booster come down in a controlled manner. SpaceX does this all the time. They have those thrusters that bring the rocket down safely and they reuse it. Rocket Labs has caught up with the helicopter. The rocket launches in the Northern Territory were recovered safely. So there's lots of ways of doing this. And this needs to be the standard to prevent any future casualties in the coming decade. In space politics, Dmitry Rogozin, who's been the head of the Roscosmos, the Russian space agency, keyword there, has been, is known for the past few months for creating quite a lot of political stir in the space community, especially in the responses to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. In fact, you can check out one of my previous videos where we talk about some of these issues that have arisen. Well, a few weeks ago, the cosmonauts on board the Russian side of the space station held up the flag of one of the breakaway regions in Ukraine, the Luhansk region, the center of this fighting in Ukraine. Now, this has grown a lot of condemnation from the space community, especially the Americans and Europeans. This is not what space is about. Both countries in the past have been very apolitical in their use of the space station, especially not just when it's together, but even when they own their own space stations. Again, during the 70s, there were the Apollo-Soyuz missions. The Russians and the Americans worked together in space. So, as I said, this really wasn't a popular move in the space community, and a lot of things that have happened in the past few months, led by Dmitry Rogozin, have been questionable at best. Well, over the weekend, President Putin has replaced him as the head of the space agency, Roscosmos, and put in now someone new, one of his deputies. So it just goes to show kind of how far away from how space is operating the past few months has been due to this conflict, and just kind of how far Rogozin was taken. So hopefully now that a new head has come in, a little bit calmer heads in space can come back, and that beautiful peace that often we see in space and that beautiful unity in terms of operations can come back again. Solar storms, falling rocket debris, dormant black holes, and new heads of space station. It's been a busy week in space. Make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel to keep up to date with even more exciting space news.